Hi everyone, welcome back to another Leanademy video. I'm Lauren Heisey. I'm here to talk. We just did a video on the DMAIC Roadmap, a very short video. Now we're going to start deep diving into what that DMAIC Roadmap is for each of those phases. Remember, this is um, a problem-solving approach that is um, that is at the heart of Lean Six Sigma, or more, if we want to be very specific, Six Sigma. But I also said I like to incorporate those Lean and Six Sigma tools together. So let's dive right in the define phase. So define phase, this is where we define the problem. So this is where we start. We're going to talk about project selection. How do you pick the right project? The project charter, define the project focus, right? And understand what the cost of poor quality is. And then we're going to talk about a side part, which is a high level process map. So it determines the start and stopping points of the project. So project selection, how do you pick the right project? And I'm also going to talk about if you have been selected to do a project and it's in a particular area, you're still going to have to do some project selection, and maybe you're even going to have to even get down into the nitty gritty and maybe truly understand what's going on within a specific area of the business. So we usually think about the first thing is brainstorming, right? We identify based on experience or knowledge. It may or may not be tied to business objectives and priorities, and it does not use data. Well, brainstorming is really, really great. It's a great start to when we start to think about brainstorming. We start to do project selection, but we really, really want to start to think about those business objectives and priorities because you want your projects to tie back to that. And then there's things like the obvious, right? Things are clear, there are problems in service or products, and it's always occurring. These type of projects where they think there are issues that are obvious, go ahead and just do it, right? So those, I would almost call those just do it kind of projects. Let's just go ahead and fix them. And then, of course, I like to take the more structured approach, right? So we use data-driven decisions. We start to use Pareto charts to help us in the project selection. But what we're looking at is we're tying it back to the business objectives. Well, it's good to start with brainstorming and then to obvious and then to structure. But when we get down to structures, we're using the data kind of to help us see the obvious and understand the brainstorming, because your gut feelings start to tell you things. But the data helps us understand where we need to go, pinpoint and where we need to go to start to do projects. But it's also tied back into those business objectives and it helps us define the problem and takes the guesswork out of the equation, right? So we're using KPIs or key performance indicators as a starting point. So is cycle time bad? Are we getting too many defects? Are we getting too many warranty recalls? Too many customer complaints? Just some things to start to think about. So let's talk about key performance indicators. It's understanding that business problem. So common KPIs when we start to look at is revenue, right? Or cost, profit margin, cycle time, defects, customer satisfaction, quality, efficiency. So what we're looking at when we think about KPIs is we're looking at measurable outcomes, right? So we're using the data to give us some measurable outcomes. So how are things going? How are things compared to the industry averages or competitors? And then we measure progress, right? So say revenue is going down, you want to increase revenue. How do you do that? Maybe we start to take a look at cost and profit margins. Is your cycle time too long? Are we having way too many defects? Are we having quality issues? All of these measurable outcomes kind of tie back into each other, which then affects the bottom line. If you're able to affect the cost, drive down cost, decrease that cycle time, decrease your defects, but increase customer satisfaction, increase your quality, increase efficiency. This will affect your revenue because it will also increase your profit margins. So now let's talk about a project charter. Before we start any project, right? After we selected the project, we have to define what that project focus looks like. This is just a sample project charter that I use with my students. Here we have to define who the project team. So who is the project lead? That's most likely going to be a green belt or black belt. You have team members, you have a coach, and you have a champion. A coach would be someone like your master black belt or even a seasoned black belt. You have your process owner. Every process has a process owner. Then we have stakeholders who, once we fix this process, it's not going to just affect the people doing the process, but there are stakeholders that this will affect. So now we start to look at a problem statement, right? So we look at the business case. So what we're looking here is, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Can the business problem be expressed in cycle time, revenue, defects, or even some type of revenue? And then the goal, right? What's the goal of the project? What goal are you looking to achieve to fix? What goal are you looking to achieve to fix the business case? And just remember, you need to be smart. So what I mean here is, you need to be specific. What particular area you're trying to improve? We got it measurable. We want to quantify, right? To show what success you believe is achievable. And when we talk about achievable, you want to make sure that goal is achievable and realistic within the time that you set. So we want to be realistic here, right? What can be achieved in time and resources available to you and the project team? If you're a green belt and only have 3 months to do a project, or a black belt, maybe you have 3 to 6 months. Remember that you need to be smart. You need to be realistic. So when you have a leader that says, oh, please, I want to reduce the cycle time for this entire area or this entire organization, you really, really need to hone in using something like a Pareto chart, or using your data to understand what area focus you need to go look at. Because if you say reduce cycle time by 25%, or reduce my defects by 50%, that is a big, big project. So what we need to do is make sure you're honing in into specific areas. And it's okay to do many projects throughout a cycle. If you think about it, if you think about it in a agile type format, right? Maybe we do maybe we have a 3 to 6 green belts kind of going and taking a look at the particular area, and they all hone in on certain areas. We also want to make sure that we can meet a goal within a reasonable time. That's what we're talking about. If you have a leader that says reduce defects by 50% by the end of the year, that's a lot undertaking to take on. So like I said, that's where you break it down into more digestible chunks for each project. Then we talk about the scopes, right? The boundaries of that project. And so we start to look at metrics. So what are the KPI? What KPI measure will be determine the success of that project, right? So when we talked in the last slide, we talked about KPI metrics. What is that we're looking at? We're looking at cycle time. Are we looking at quality, inefficiencies, cost, anything like that are good metrics to use. And it's okay to have 1 or 2 metrics within your project. Because you had primary metric, you got a secondary metric. Now let's change focus a little bit. We're going to talk about the cost of poor quality. So this is the financial loss incurred due to delivering bad quality. So when I like to think about the cost of bad quality, usually I like to think about it in an iceberg type approach, right? So quality is an iceberg, so it's visible. It's easy. The visible cost of poor quality is something that's easy to see and measure. So when we think about lien waste, customer returns and warranties, rejects, inspection cost, recalls, rework, these are all things that we can see. But the hidden occurs most often. It's hard to uncover because it's hard to see. So when you think about the iceberg, right, you have the iceberg might look, it looks big on the surface, but underneath it is much bigger than we had anticipated. So this comes into manual work. People sometimes don't understand that when the manual work that we do today actually goes back into rework. It goes back into rejects or defects. Multiple entries of the same data into different systems. This increases cycle time. Then we get excessive overtime. Old systems that cost a lot of money. People don't tend to think about how an old system, even though it's working, could be costing a lot of money because it could turn back into manual work and multiple entries of the same data in different systems. Complaint handling, we have idle time. And of course, frustrated employees. Frustrated employees is something that's very hard to measure. But if your employees are so frustrated because the process is so bad, and they have excessive overtime, and we feel like we're being a lot of firefighting, this is where we start to turn into, we start to increase cycle time. Your employees are not doing the best work. So that's one thing I like everyone to take away from this part too, is that when you have frustrated employees, it just leads to all of this. It can lead to all of the visible, can lead to the, the visible cost of poor quality. And late payments is another one, and low customer loyalty. So basically what we're looking for is the loss of profit that can be prevented. That's what I want you to take away from this G, right? The loss of profit that can be prevented. So now let's move into the boundaries. What are the boundaries of a project? A lot of times people get a little don't try to figure out how do we get there. So to get to the boundaries, we get to that by using a high-level process map. So SIPOC stands for suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers. So basically it provides a starting and stopping point of the process that the team will work on. Remember, we were talking about being smart with the project charter. We do the SIPOC, so we'll start with the charter, but a lot of times we'll do the SIPOC and then go back and update the project charter to kind of include this into the scope. So it helps the project team to agree on the process to concentrate on and guide the project team into a detailed process map in the measure phase. So usually when we start doing a SIPOC, we start with the process. So step 1 is we have 4 to 10 high-level process steps. We identify the start and stop steps of the SIPOC, and then we use a verb noun structure. So the steps should convey how we have inputs, right, that are coming into the process and how we convert them into an output. Then the next step 2 is we're going to talk about the output. What is the output to the process? It can be a product, a service, can also include paperwork approvals, or anything that is an output of this process. And if there are a lot of outputs, we concentrate on those critical ones. So I've seen it where we've had lots of outputs. Concentrate on the product or that service that's coming out of that process. Step 3 is who is the customer, right? Every process has at least one customer, that either internal or external. So customers are the recipients of these outputs. Who is that output going to? Next, then we start to talk about the inputs, right? So we talked about the process, the output, and the customer. Now we're going to talk about the inputs. That's step 4. What are the inputs needed to produce the output? And so inputs can be anything where we can be IT systems, materials, people, machines, information, SOPs. Inputs are anything that make that process run. And next, then we talk about the suppliers. Who supplies those inputs into the process? So you identify the suppliers that provide that provide the inputs. I went a little too fast. So that's basically what a SIPOC is. It's just something very high level. It gets people thinking. I know sometimes people like to kind of skip this step, but I think a SIPOC is so important, and it is hard to do because you're trying to take people like to think very detailed when they work their process, but you're trying to then bring them up a level so that way you can understand where your starting and stopping points are. What do you have control over? So this is an example of a customer care call center wait time. This is something I worked on with one of my clients. So the process here is we started with call into customer call number, right? And then we ended with end call, very easy. So basically the customer listens to the options, chooses an options, they talk to the call center rep, they provide information or resolve the issue, and then we end the call. So the output of that is a resolved issue, customer needs are met, received information, retain the customer. And these are just outputs that we really, really wanted to hone in on. And of course, the customer was the bank customer. Then we started talking about the inputs, right? So we had customer actions, job aids, the individual voice response unit. So that's the number that they call into. SOPs, banking system, customer information, and then the call center ticketing system. And the suppliers into that was the bank customer, the call center reps, and the first customer bank. It's just something I came up with. So that's basically what a SIPOC looks like. It is hard to do that process part of it, but it's very easy. It gets people thinking about what process you're going to do, what's the stopping ending point, and it just kind of gives you an idea of a high level of where we're going to concentrate on your project.